So welcome to the Board of Education special board meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please? Here.
Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Tapia Romero. Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson. Yolanda Montoya.
Here. Let's see. So our first item is approval of the agenda for the October 18th, 2023 Special Board of Education meeting workshop on the superintendent search. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the October 18th, 2023 Special Board of Education meeting workshop on the superintendent search.
I'll second. This is Peggy.
May I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Okay, so I think we're missing a few folks, but hopefully some folks will join us. Our first, so what we're going to do is this discussion today is phase one of the superintendent search, and I'm delighted that we have Dr. Walt Cooper here with us from McPherson and Jacobson LLC, executive recruitment and development search firm that was selected to help us with this process. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Cooper, who is going to lead us through this conversation of our phase one and give us all the good tips and strategies and activities as we're moving forward. So welcome, Dr. Cooper, to Albuquerque Public Schools, and welcome to Albuquerque.
Thanks very much.
All right, so you have the floor and let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you. I cannot log into the Zoom meeting. It's for the 5 o'clock meeting, it said, was the invitation. So I don't know that I'll need to do that unless there's something that you would like me to share on my screen.
We do
We do.
have your handout with
Yes,
us, but I
yes.
mean, it would be great to have, if we could have it zoomed up. So because we've got Barbara Peterson, we've got board member Peterson who doesn't have access.
And this, so what you have in front of you is also what was emailed to everyone
Okay.
last week.
Okay,
All of the attachments are the same and in the same
Okay.
order. The only difference is that we don't have the annotated agenda that I had sent in my previous packet.
okay.
Again, thank you for this opportunity. We're looking forward. There's some feedback going on somewhere, but looking forward to the opportunity to work with you all in the search for your next superintendent. We know this is without a doubt the most important undertaking that boards of education are faced with. And so we want to do everything in our power to make this a success for you and the students and staff and community of APS. So what we are doing today is what we call, for those of you that were that either saw our proposal or that were part of the screening, we call this phase one of the 5 phases of our search. The search itself is actually, we consider that through 4 phases. Phase 4 being the actual interviews of finalists and your selection. Phase 5 comes later after your new superintendent is onboarded and it talks about transition. But today we're here to do phase 1. And so phase 1 really is to build the blueprint for the search going forward. We'll talk about the timeline for the search. We'll talk about advertising. We'll talk about selection criteria. That probably will take the lion's share of our time today. Talk a little bit about stakeholder feedback and stakeholder engagement, salary determination, those kinds of things. So I will walk you through that, each of those in the agenda one by one, but the first, is it in my calendar or email? Okay, bear with me for one moment. This load. Wrong link. Okay. Okay. Just let me, I'll just leave this open and then just let me know. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is just to review process and expectations for the search. The process for the search really are the remaining items on the agenda for today, those things that I just mentioned. The most important part, I think, about this first item on the agenda is for an opportunity for any of you to, if you have any questions before we launch into this, if there was anything in the material that was unclear, if there's anything that will help you progress through each of these things today as we, as I said, build this blueprint for the search, I want to make sure we have an opportunity to address those right up front, so that nobody is surprised or confused as we go through each of those steps. So,
Any questions at this point? Nope. I think we're good. And just for the record, board member Gonzalez did join us. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so let's jump right in, and we'll start with the establishing the timeline. And notice on the agenda it says benchmark timeline. And as I said in my preliminary information, we can, one of the things that we pride ourselves on in the work that we do with boards is being very flexible. Note, we have a standard protocol. You saw that in our proposal, and most searches are, you know, they're more similar than they are different, but no two are exactly alike. So whatever we need to do to best meet the needs of the Albuquerque community and you as a board, we will do that. And one of the primary places where that happens is with the timeline. And so we've established this draft. And as I said, we can talk about and move dates around however we really need to, understanding that some of these dates are contingent upon dates that either come that are before or after them on the timeline, and so they have to move together. Others are independent. We can put them wherever we want to put them, if that makes sense. So this timeline that I've laid out here as preliminary is, obviously you see the phase 1 board meeting today. After we do our work here, I will go back home to Colorado Springs and craft the information that what we settle on in terms of advertising venues and the search criteria and all that other sort of stuff. I will put that into the actual posting that will then go on the McPherson Jacob website to all partners and all of the advertising that we decide on, and we will have that up next week. So as of middle of next week, the search will be live, if you will, and we will start collecting applications from candidates and applicants. Okay. The other two dates that I have on the next two dates are the online stakeholder survey. And these are two dates that are easily the most flexible. So when later on in the agenda, we're going to talk about the design of a stakeholder survey, what we actually want to include on that, and then we can come back and talk about the specific dates relative to, I learned this afternoon, once I got to Albuquerque, I've learned about the dates of the regional town halls that are going to happen. So we may want to be strategic around the beginning and the end of those with that stakeholder. So I've put between November 1st and November 12th, but those are really no more than placeholders at this point. We can start and stop that online survey whenever we want to. Okay. So we'll come back to those dates once we actually talk about the stakeholder engagement process. The application submission deadline that I've proposed is the 12th of December. So that leaves this open about 7 weeks, which is ample time and pretty typical in these processes. And we don't wait until the 12th of December. My colleagues and I don't wait until December 12th to start reviewing and vetting candidates. We do that dynamically as they come in. So you'll notice then within about 3 or 4 days of the application's closing, we will then identify what we call the short list of candidates that we will invite to produce video interviews. So now that we typically think about 5 or 6 in a search of this size. We can do many more than that, right? There's no magic number. The cost of the individual video interviews is insignificant. I think it's $50 an interview, something like that. So it really doesn't matter. But we will then be ready to turn loose with those invitations by the 15th of December, and then we give folks about a week to respond. Those interviews are 3 questions, and they're not 3 questions that are really detailed and unique to Albuquerque. We ask them basically to highlight their interest and why they think they're a fit for Albuquerque. What do they know about the district and the challenges, and why are they well experienced to handle that? These are not dynamic interviews. They're one-way interviews. The candidates are given an invitation to an online platform, a third-party platform we manage, and they produce those interviews. Then phase 4, if you look at the projected timeline we have as January 8th. So if you remember from the those of you that were part of the presentation that I gave in our proposal, we really said we engage the board primarily before we get to the interview. Boy, that goes without saying. We engage the board twice, significantly engage the board. The first is today and what we're doing right now in phase 1. The next is phase 4, and that's when I and my colleagues, potentially some of my colleagues, will come back and we will, with you in executive session, review the video interviews, the video responses from all of those candidates that were invited, with the goal of the board identifying from that group of candidates who they would like to interview in person, either as preliminary candidates, chapter 2, if you will, or as finalists, right? Depending on how many steps along the way, how many times you want to engage in person with candidates before you actually get to your the final round, after which you will debrief and select your candidate. If I read the calendar correctly, you all are back the week. Everyone is back on the ground the week of January 5th. After the holidays, is that correct? The school calendar?
I think so.
Starting the week of 5th. So January 8th, again, that's a date that we can, that date really is not contingent on anything other than having to be obviously after the video interviews are due back,
And I think it also just depends on like the first date of the regular board meeting, because that's an organizational meeting for
Sure.
the board following the election and, the selection of the new executive team and so on and so forth. So, but it sounds like we have some flexibility. And what I'm hearing from you is that a lot of that's just going to depend on how we get those things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, they're
January 3rd.
It's January 3rd. Okay.
January 3rd is the reorganization meeting.
It's the first board meeting, yeah,
Okay.
with the new board where we elect officers.
So yes, we can, I said earlier, some dates are moving some dates, then other dates move continually.
Okay.
So that the only thing really we're bound, well, 2 things that we're bound by there. Number 1, your desire to have candidates present at the regional town halls that you have on your planning calendar for January. So we'll want to work sort of backwards from those dates once you set those dates, because I imagine that if those dates aren't set now, they will be soon. Is that a good assumption?
And it seems to me like because I'm thinking of like that first selection or review process is going to be with new board,
Yes.
so that we've got to give them an opportunity. And as you and I had spoke before you came here, so one of the things that mentioned was we will have our elected officials identified before then, because the election is November 7th. So sort of looking of how do we bring in the newer board members as part of like a search committee. There, you had mentioned a way for them to sign like confidentiality forms and so on and so forth to be part of that. So they're not just coming in completely cold in January. So there's a way to really sort of bring them along in the process so that when we hit January and we have regional town halls, they'll be on board. So the regional town halls with the final candidates, that conversation, was that coming from the ad hoc committee? Okay.
And do we, remind me, it's been a while and I'm tired. Do we have a calendar? Did we come up with a calendar?
Because all I've heard
They
is
get
that
approved?
we do have the regional town halls. The stakeholder meetings in November were determined because those were dates that were shared today on the 13th and the 16th of November. But the meetings in January, I don't remember.
Correct. We adopted a calendar that says the months that they're in, but we haven't picked the date.
You haven't picked the dates. Okay. So what we'll need to do then as the board is go back and sort of finalize those pieces, because I think that's going to help us. Yeah, so that, because it's all going to be connected to this. Okay.
So it would have, I mean, we obviously have some time.
Yeah.
We don't even know all of the.
And
players
it's-
of that.
It's also a tricky time though, too, because families are just, I mean, we've got school starting back up. And so I think we just need to be thoughtful about what that means for the community members as they're coming back in January. But what I heard from Dr. Cooper today in our pre-meeting is that we've got a pretty generous timeline here too. So everything would just get adjusted by a week or two. And so, you know, our timeline of having named a selected candidate by the end of January is aggressive, but it doesn't necessarily need to occur at that point and at that juncture, because we do have some time that we could build some things in there. So,
Yeah.
so I'm feeling pretty confident about where we are. But once we get to those regional town hall meetings, I think we need to be really sensitive to the fact that we're going to ask schools to be part of that process. And so we'll get back to you on making sure that we're
I
really
would
clear on
just-
that.
I would just say, as you look at the proposed timeline here, I was assuming that would be someplace the third week of January
Okay.
or later.
Okay.
Because we'll also need to sort out what the board's wishes are around preliminary candidate interviews. If we do those virtually, we can probably turn those around in a day after we come together to review the videos. If you want to bring candidates in, then obviously now things are protracted because we have to
Mhm.
allow folks, opportunity to arrange travel. So I would just encourage, as you look at those regional town hall dates, later in January is better than earlier in January, both from our perspective and exactly what you just mentioned.
Go ahead.
I just had a question about the video invitations to selected candidates and how you think that will go, considering that there could be 3 new board members, and what kind of input they're going to have into that. What kind of involvement are they going to have? And is it appropriate to have it before they have, taken office on January?
Very good question. So I think it's absolutely, they can have as much involvement in this as you all determine as the governing body, right? And I think it would be perfectly appropriate, because in many searches that we do, the board appoints a search committee. Sometimes the board is part of a search in conjunction with a search committee. Sometimes the search committee is the first cut and the board doesn't even participate in that, and the search committee brings the next level. So I think as long as we understand what the rules of engagement are, and everyone who is going to be engaged with a candidate, whether that be virtual or in person, agrees to the confidentiality affidavit with our firm. I'll get to that in just a minute. It's almost a moot point in New Mexico, given the transparency laws and the open records. But in many places where all candidates but final candidates are held in confidence, that becomes a much bigger deal. Like I said, it's really almost superfluous to go through that exercise in New Mexico, given the laws here. But yeah, I think it's absolutely appropriate to have whomever you decide to have around the table or in the room as we go through reviewing. We'll work through some exercises about how do we identify implicit bias in evaluating candidates, and what is the rubric that we're using to score candidates. Obviously, you can't blind score a video interview, right? But we want to make sure that we are objective as possible and keep bias out of this process as best we can. So we can go through that exercise and involve folks in reviewing candidate videos with whomever, if there are other senior level administrative folks that you want to have as part of that. Sometimes that happens, other times that, it's like I said, we're flexible on that. But in terms of appropriateness, we've done that many times.
That is why I would want to make sure that they were involved. It will be, somebody that is going to be their employee. So I just want to make sure that the new board members would be able to take part in that. I just remember when I first came on and we were going through that and everything was kind of almost
Yes.
done. And so it made
I
it
could not agree with
not.
you, and I applaud you for that because that's certainly important.
Thank you.
So with that, are there any, at first glance, are there any significant dates that we need to, circle twice in red and say, boy, this really is not going to work? Understanding that some of these will be fluid, but let's say, this is not going to work and we need to back up.
And I'd say the same thing just with that December 22nd, just because of,
December's a hard.
it's just a hard month
Yeah.
it's a hard month for me. It's a hard month for our families. There's, the testing going on for finals. It's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And so that would be, I think, difficult for our families, and it would be difficult for.
But I think this is when.
Really,
candidate
yeah,
videos
there
are-
really is.
Isn't much about us because they have to
Exactly.
provide the responses.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
And-
on the candidates, yeah.
And we picked that December 22nd date there very specifically because that often is the
Before
week
their-
prior to the break,
Right.
where things
have
really,
downtime.
they have time to sit down and actually do the interviews. And
How
they're
long
not
is that interview? It's a very short video.
three
so-
questions, 3 minutes per interview.
Yeah.
For 3 questions, 3 minutes per question. So if they use the full time, it's 9 minutes each.
Okay. So there's really nothing that's happening for us at our level, board member.
No, the
Right,
next
it's-
time we would
it's on
really
them.
significantly engage the board by this timeline would be January 8th.
Mhm.
And if we want to move that date around a little bit, once we, know who's going to be seated and see their schedule and all we can. I would encourage you not to move it much because we're going to publish this with the posting, right? And everybody knows that dates can change. But if that change, if we change things by 2, 3, or 4 weeks,
It-
that significantly
Throws it off.
impacts the path of the candidates,
does.
and we don't want to do that.
So can you tell me, so I know on the video invitations to selected candidates, you say that's going to take place after the stakeholder meetings, et cetera. And then we will have the executive session in January. So when we're talking about those selected candidates, that's going to be based on what we or you heard as well from the in-person stakeholder meetings, as well as from the sitting board, and if we include the incoming board members. And I just want to make sure that they are included in this. That is just important to me, that they will be included in those selected candidates as
So
well.
but a point of clarification, because what I heard from you, Mr. Cooper, was that those video invitations to selected candidates would be candidates that you all would,
Correct.
they're the ones that are doing the
you
weeding
picked.
out. They're selecting.
Based on
Yes,
all the
yes.
input.
Based
et
on what we're
cetera.
going to do
Yes.
here in a little bit,
Right.
based on what we
Mhm.
hear from stakeholders.
So
Which
it's
is
not
what
board,
mostly
it's not board members that are making that first selection on that. So, and what I want to emphasize here is that even for candidates that are running or that have already been elected, we've got these in-person stakeholder meetings. We've got opportunities for them to participate and be a part of just as much as we're going to be a part of those conversations.
Right. Nothing happens prior
Right.
to election day.
Right, okay. So,
Except-
but I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that those video invitations are not invitations that we're deciding. It's our selection firm is deciding for us based on what they've heard
All the input.
and the candidates that they vetted and
First
all of
cut,
the
if you
things. Yes,
First cut.
okay, thank you.
We add a date on here that's newly elected orientation or newly elected something, like, because you mentioned that we would want them to sign the
Confidentiality.
confidentiality. Yep. Because we're going to be doing orientation anyway, and they do attend NMSBA anyway. So I think we should just at least name on here that there's going to be a newly elected board member.
And
thing.
we've got a potential date for that already.
Working on that.
Yeah,
Which
we're
is fine. So I
working on
think we
that. We'll
just put
add
the
it
thing
to
and
the
then we add
calendar.
TBD.
December.
Okay.
It's December, right?
No, it's in November. We're doing it right after
Oh,
election.
right after.
So
If you would like for me to join virtually for that orientation for a small portion to talk to.
That would be
answer any
perfect.
questions, either one of my colleagues or I can certainly do
Okay.
that.
we could certainly
So
add that
would
in.
be- That would even be another reason to include it here on this timeline
Mhm.
for full transparency.
Yeah, I met with Johanna today and we've come up with we don't have a firm date yet because we have to get it, just solidified with senior management staff internally to make sure it's a good date, but we've got a couple of dates floating, but we'll get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay. Great.
And that would be a perfect time for us with the new candidates to agree to have them sign like confidentiality forms and whatever else we need to do as part of
That's what
the
I-
selection process.
What I would really like to do, and this primarily is driven by number of candidates and where we are, is to share those video clips. We have a manner in which we can protect those and share those video clips with board members prior to when we convene in that phase 4
Okay.
meeting. So you can look at them at least once, maybe twice at your leisure. And then we can take a deeper dive when we're all together around the same table. But
Makes a lot of sense.
so and that's really the primary driver of that is just this confidentiality affidavit. But as I said before, that's almost a moot point. So.
I'm just laughing because like one of the things that I know board member Dominguez and I is like, we have watched so many videotapes recently around just some of our trainings. So it's like, what, 30 minutes of videotape watching or an hour piece of cake? Yeah.
Great. Going, gone on the timeline as of now?
Okay.
Not any, okay. Okay, so the next thing we have.
But let me stop for a second. Board member Peterson, because you're online, I know it's a little bit harder to like get yourself in there. Do you have any questions at all or concerns about the timeline that's been presented?
No, it sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. Thank you.
We're sort of locked into certain things. And so I think this is addressing all of those issues.
Yeah.
And it is and I know you said this, will this stay as a draft timeline though, in case some of those dates do change? So will it still be, or will it be fine? It'll still be.
Once we publish it with the posting, right, it sort of sets out there, we can go in and change that. But operationally, yeah, we can move these around whenever. It's the only thing that gets a little bit tricky is once we've committed to candidates around their schedules.
They have to, we have to stick to that date. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's talk about very quickly about the next, which is the advertising. So that next item in your packet is the checklist of what we would recommend. So as part of our contract and what we've agreed to, those are what we've identified there with the check marks as the yes. So you are a member of the Council of Greater City Schools. That's always on the checklist, but that only applies to those school districts that are a member. So we will post it with them as well. The two primary drivers there are three. Number one, our website. Our website gets a couple of 100,000 hits a month, but folks have to know and have to go search for that information. The most traffic we get is from AASA, Superintendent's Association, and then topschooljobs.org, which is the online job board for Ed Week, for Education Week. Those two are included here. Those two are included in your contract. We'll post that for 30 days, starting as soon as the posting goes up. And as I said, then we'll provide a link and an announcement for you to put on the APS website. I would assume you'd want to do that. Your comms folks can create a superintendent search presence on it. Well, I know that's already there, but add to that with the link or whatever else. And so really the only thing, the question here is are there other avenues? For example, do you want us to post this announcement in the journal, for example? Those kinds of more local types of things. We get
We probably could just do, I'm looking at our comms person over there. We probably could just write some sort of editorial or something, say, hey, it's official, it started, here's the place to go look.
Yeah, it-
You know, or it's
almost-
posted on the website, because nobody looks at a
all of our
journal
traffic-
post.
All
Yeah.
of our traffic is digital. Anyway.
Yeah. Mhm,
What didn't used to be national, this would be national search anyway, but what didn't
mhm.
previously weren't national searches are now because
Yeah.
everything's digital. So we'll just go with this.
I mean, the only thing that I would like to, I mean, that I think is just important to me, and it may not be to anybody else, but the Association of Latino administrators and superintendents, like
So-
just because of,
I just,
our culture, I
I
think
just
that
glanced
would
at
be.
this, and that's an oversight on my part because
Okay.
that and also the National Alliance of Black School Educators are both included in our standard postings.
Okay.
Okay.
So
and
if
then
you look on the America, the ALAS is included as well as so I just didn't get the X in there.
And I don't know how much you do on NALEO, which is also the National Association of Latin Elected Officials. And I know that a lot of times that goes on. I'm on their board of directors. And so that might be something that if you could look into that one, but for sure, ALAS would be kind of a for sure
Yeah,
one.
those two are for all of our searches, we include
Okay.
both of
I
those.
appreciate
just-
that.
they
Thank
just
you.
weren't marked. So
Thank you.
I apologize for that.
No worries.
So I'd like to, go ahead.
Well, so I was just gonna say, there's other media outlets besides EdWeek. So if we could add like Chalkbeat and the 74 and some of those other education focused
Yep.
media outlets.
You certainly can. That's an additional cost, right? Each of those are fee for postings. That's fine. So Chalkbeat is one based on Chalkbeat has a pretty good footprint in various regions. And so if you want us to include Chalkbeat for this specifically, we certainly can do that. Does that see everybody?
What's usually the
Right.
cost for that?
It's about $1,000 for 30 days.
So I think it would be helpful for you to come back with the cost for all of these so
Sure.
that we could look at that before making the decision. But so I would add Chalkbeat and the 74, which is another education media outlet. And then there's lots of listservs. So like Chiefs for Change, for example, specifically works with
Yes.
superintendents, districts,
And-
and
and-
chief state
And
chief state
typically,
school officers. And then there's Women Leading Ed, which focuses specifically on developing women in education and superintendents.
Yep.
And then there's superintendent development organizations like the Broad Center at Yale. So I would want to just include outreach to all of these organizations that are working specifically on developing superintendent candidates.
yeah. So, for example, the Broad Center, right, that they don't actually have a job posting board. We just send the information to them. They distribute that. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
we always include Brody's in there. Most of what we've learned with most other, like Chiefs for Change, for example, will pick up on the AASA postings and we'll forward those again. But we can certainly reach out to those that even don't have specific job posting boards, but maybe they have distribution lists that they would include this on. So that's what the Broad Center, that's what Brody's do is they just put it in their blast. But we get a number of applications from Brody still, so even though their numbers are dwindling.
So you could just come back to us with whatever the price with adding the ones that Member Gonzalez and the ones. I know you said ALAS was already in there in NABSE, and then if you just look at NALEO and 70, just.
And those are
Come
both
back with us.
NABSE and also both 6-week postings, just baseline. So
Okay.
the others are 30 days.
And so do we have other, do any of these have Native American? Is there a clearing home for Native American specifically, or I mean,
Not-
they're
not-
pretty small?
Yeah, not that we're aware of specifically for those posts. So for example, when we did Ignacio Public Schools in Southwest Colorado, we worked specifically with the Ute Mountain Ute Council. And just said, here it is, please help distribute this among your,
Mhm,
we didn't gain any traction from that, but
mhm.
it really is more, those are more informal networks that if we
That would
know of
probably be
folks to
done.
connect.
Yeah, with our tribal leadership.
And also through established communication channels through your comms folks, which I'm
Mhm.
sure are pretty extensive. So we'll provide the same template and connection to the online application platform. in that initial posting to your communications folks and anybody else that wants it, right? Just for,
Mhm.
put it on your Facebook presence or whatever it might be. And it's all the same information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yes, I will get that back to you very shortly.
Board Member Peterson online, do you have any comments on this section? Or are you good?
I think we need to advertise as broadly as possible. I think that it will come down to how do we think about them and look at the input that we get from our community. So I think I have no problem with what's been proposed
Thank you.
as an initial step.
Very good segue to the feedback we get from the community. So the next item on the agenda is to talk about stakeholder feedback and stakeholder groups. And the next attachment or the next document in your packet is a sample of the very simple, it's simple, it's not simplistic, the very simple survey questions that we like to use in terms of the online survey. It goes beyond just putting out the survey, however, because we will also pose these questions, however we in concert with you decide to do this in the stakeholder groups. We also ask these same, or the baseline questions to this. The sample that you have in front of you and what we would propose is that we do the online survey through K-12 Insights. It doesn't cost the district anymore. This is part of what we do for our larger clients, because they have, with smaller clients, we manage our own online survey and we do text analysis, but it's a more simplistic approach. So in larger districts where we think we will have quite a number of our participants, K-12 Insights data analysis and their presentation of this information is much more robust. And so we like to keep it at 5 questions or less. We found that, and they have found, I mean, they do this right for a living. More than 5 questions, participation rates plummet very quickly. So what you have in this sample is actually the survey, the populated survey in a district of similar size in Arizona that we're working with right now. We can ask and frame the questions however you would like to have them framed, but what I would say is that the third question on this, which asks what are the skills, traits, experiences, and characteristics that this person must possess to be successful, I would highly encourage you to use that question. We use that in, I can't think of a search that we've done where we haven't used that. And then the next question, which asks the community's perspective of what are the most significant challenges the new superintendent will face once she or he takes over the role. Anything else we can add however you would like to add. That first question is the district wanted to put that in there just for general information. It's the first time I've seen that question asked, but it's a simple click the box, move on. There might be something else of that nature that you all would like to ask. We can substitute that. We can take it out however you would like to do that.
You're talking about the perception one?
Yes, that very.
Now, how important do you think perception is to picking a superintendent? It's just a question.
Yeah, so I don't think it's very important at all in terms of picking the superintendent. Here's what I would tell you though. What we've heard, so there are really 3 critical pieces, 3 most important pieces to the stakeholder feedback report and the data that will be generated from this. The first is, well, there are actually 4. So the first one is it really helps the board because we're going to work through the selection criteria exercise here in a few minutes, right? Once we get the stakeholder feedback, it really helps the board sort of as a litmus test. Were we on the same page, or is there significant divergence between what we think is most important and what we had set forth in our criteria and what we heard from our community? I will tell you that almost never happens.
Mhm.
There's pretty good synergy, the right convergence there. The second thing, it helps us significantly as we start to compare candidate to candidate and candidates to criteria when we start to narrow that list of all the applicants down to first cut, second cut, that sort of thing. Thirdly, it really helps us, and these are the two most important, I'm going in order, helps us to craft interview questions. Because we want to make sure we don't want to have, we'll have a script of 16, 18, 20 questions, right, that you all will run through as the board in their final interviews. We don't want to have that script fully populated with just very high level, high altitude, generic interview questions about leadership style. Those have a place. But we really want to make sure that we dive deeply and vet very closely those things with candidates that are most important to their being successful here in APS. So without your input here and without the community's input through the stakeholder, we're working in a vacuum there. We're working in a void. Lastly, and this gets to your point, what we hear search after search after search from selected candidates, so whomever it is that you hire, their review of the stakeholder feedback is absolutely critical as a piece of their transition into the role. Helps them know what's really going well, helps them know which questions they need to ask right off the bat, what things they better not mess up and what things they better hit the ground running and be prepared to address. And so to that point, in terms of helping the candidate maybe assess the landscape a little more closely, I can see where a question like this would be beneficial. You asked about selecting the superintendent. It's not going to help that much, right? Now, that said, I'm sure that you have a lot of other data points from community surveys, from town hall, whatever else, that would also be of great benefit to the selected candidate in terms of transition. So
Okay.
again, it's really up to you whether you would like to have that information as part of this process or not.
So can I just ask a quick question? So barring the first question is how well do you perceive the district? If we took that one, I'm just looking at the other questions. So these other three questions, are those pretty standard so those are the standard questions that you have been asking consistently? Okay. And Board Member Gonzalez.
Well, I was going to say, it doesn't seem to me that we need 1 and 2. So if we're asking how well do you perceive the district, and then we also ask, please explain, it seems that that kind of replicates what's under what are the positive attributes of the school district and community. So if they click very well, they would be telling us what's very well. If they click good, they would be telling us the second answer. And if they click needs improvement, it's the opposite.
So what you don't see, and here's, thank you for bringing that up, is the logic involved in the survey that only populates if needs improvement is the selection.
Please explain only populates if
Yes.
needs improvement.
So
Can it populate period?
it could, yeah. It's just, that's the way the survey logic is designed in there, but yeah,
Okay, well, that answers because they do seem to
it does seem a
be
bit redundant.
repetitive.
Yes.
So guidance that we got from our Council of Great City Schools coach is that this question, what are the skills, traits, experiences, and characteristics this person must possess, is not a good question to ask. And the guidance that we received is then you just sort of end up with the list of qualifications that's the unicorn candidate, and those all make sense. And then you try to find that unicorn candidate, and that's not actually helpful versus the flip of that question, which was, what do you not want? So that was the guidance that we received. Like, don't ask the unicorn question, ask what you not want question, because that's clearer and limits more. So I'm just curious, could we ask both? Like, what do you want to see in the superintendent? And then what do you not want to see in the superintendent?
Absolutely.
I mean, it could be one question and then you slash or don't want to see or not.
I think that I'm certainly not an expert in this, but I think what they would tell you is that becomes problematic.
Mhm.
That the survey question itself has to be very specific in terms of response. So I think your suggestion of asking both separate questions, and then you look for both conflicts and consistencies across those two, right? But that's what K-12 can, that their analytics can do that much better than we can less.
Then we'd be going, if we kept one, we'd be going to 6 then, and you said 5 was,
That's why I was wanting to cut.
Yeah, I think I would,
I think we'd cut anything else to
just cut it.
share too, so.
okay.
But go ahead, board member, I don't want to, because I did want to ask, I mean, I'm just, and this is more for the board, you know, for us, for our consideration. How do you feel about the language level of these questions, given our community too, and some of the, you know, English language learner, or, I mean, you did mention you could translate this into
Yeah.
Spanish, so that wasn't an issue, but I'm just curious from your perspectives. I'm not, I'm just what your thoughts are on it.
So my initial reaction, so positive attributes is hard to know what
Mhm.
that means, which was
Yeah.
also one of the reasons why I wanted to cut that one. Skills, traits, experience, characteristics. I do recall in the previous search, people were given a list because we sat at our Thanksgiving table and we read out the list and then we all argued over it. So I think there might be an opportunity to like, if you don't know what those means, you could click and probably even go back to like, oh, this is what that is. But we have all that from the previous search just a couple of years ago, I would assume.
yeah, so, and I'm familiar with that approach. And typically,
Sort of,
the way I understand it is the reason these are open-ended responses
mhm.
is because of the technology and the ability to analyze the open-ended responses.
And I'm not suggesting we don't make it open.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that we allow people to click to get a definition of what does skills, traits, experiences, characteristics mean.
Yes,
And that would include like examples.
and I admittedly do not know if that's a capability within the way that the platform is projected or not, but I can certainly find out.
Fine.
And if not, perhaps, you know, we can reword this with some parenthetical information, you know, that says, for example, you know, some.
I also would want to ask that question of Monica.
I know, that's, I was looking at Monica as well. I don't think she's got the questions in front of her, but if would you join us at the table?
I had extra packets.
She is our communications person, so Monica might have some thoughts for us on the framing of these questions and what some of our experience has been.
Ms. Gonzalez's point about the first question, you know, we could very simply reword that, or what are the best things about Albuquerque Public Schools that you would share with people, or, you know, we can,
We'd want the new
The
superintendent to know.
the semantics themselves, we can do however you think works best. So, hi, Monica, good night to you in person.
And I think we have a survey that got good results. A district survey, something like, what are the strengths? What do you see as the strengths of the district?
I think the questions at first draft look fine.
Okay.
I think that I am always worried about language, so thank you for that. But I think that given the caliber of the candidates that you're looking for, that the questions are not worded in any way that.
These would go to the public.
Oh, to the public.
These
I'm
would go
sorry.
to our parents, to our community to respond and to provide.
Then I would want to work a little bit on being more specific. So when we say, how well do you perceive the district is performing?
How's the
Um,
district doing? Like, I don't know, simple.
Yeah, perceive gets to perception, which I know we're looking for, but I think we want something a little deeper. And it just doesn't tell us exactly what we're asking here. Maybe just simplifying it a little. What are the positive attributes of the school district and community that might attract high quality candidates? You know, again, I think the word is qualities, right? What are the positive qualities of the school district and community that might attract high quality candidates? I probably have to spend a little more time on there.
Or might attract a new superintendent. I mean, I guess, because I'm even thinking of like a candidate for what? I mean, I don't want them to be
Yes.
confused. I want it to be very specific. This is about a new superintendent.
And if you would like, we could call a small, take a little bit of time, but it'd be worth the effort if you'd want us to put together a small focus group to to look at the questions just to give you an idea of people who don't work in APS and how they see these questions. And I understand why the question's being asked. We want to make sure we get feedback from everyone, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I mean, high quality could even be the best candidates.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that.
Can we go back to the first question very quickly? I didn't hear a whole lot of love for that in general. Given the purpose,
Mhm.
right, the targeted purpose of this process. So if there's agreement that we can just eliminate the first question because that data may be available through at some point in time, some other venue, then we can just focus on the 3 narrative questions and make those as specific and targeted as possible.
Especially because you went through who that would really help. It would help you to come up with, interview questions. It would help the superintendent to understand.
Yeah, so
The
actually the first
community.
question really doesn't help me at all.
So,
Right, I mean, it helps the selected candidate potentially, but
mhm.
my guess is that information in general is going to be available in other places. So if we can agree that we'll eliminate that, then Monica and I can work on what the actual best text for some narrative questions would be and circle back. Because we don't have to launch this immediately.
Right. I know, because the proposed launch on this is not until November 1st.
Right, and I think that would even
Oh,
get
that's
pushed.
just around the
Yeah,
corner.
But I
was
but
gonna
I think-
say,
I think
wait,
we would-
we're already in
I think we
October.
would push that back a
Okay.
little bit, probably anyway, knowing that you have the dates of the
In-person
13th, the
meetings, okay.
13th And the 16th of the
Okay.
regional town hall. So
Okay, I
if we
see.
launch it a day or two ahead of that and close it 5 or 6 days after that,
Okay.
then
It,
we can
it,
leverage it all together.
it aligns with that. Okay, I get it.
So there's no,
Forgot,
No
we're
real
already
rush.
at the end of October.
Yes.
Hey.
Well, I would want to keep it open as long as possible. So from my perspective, if we could keep it open from the 1st to the 13th or 14th, that would be ideal. But
If you can get it all put together.
yeah, I mean, again, I think just some wordsmithing to make it clearer and to add the what do you not want question to get rid of the first one. I don't think it has to be that complicated.
It'll only be.
Okay.
4 questions, so it's-
any other thoughts? We'll
Board Member Peterson, cutting to you, you have any thoughts?
I think it's really tricky to get valid input, just because the people who are going to reply, I think, are a subset of the community. And so I think that what the feedback that we get will be important and we need to look at, but we need to really keep our ears open for other parts of the community that may not reply in this format. So it's always hard. I mean, it's the exact same challenge that we have with, whether we're talking goals and guardrails or the strategic plan, it's always the same challenge for making sure that we get a real valid input of across the community. So, I mean, I don't have any particular strong feelings about these questions. I think that we need to continue to think of ways of broadening what kind of input we get.
And it's absolutely correct, because what the survey doesn't tell us is what communities have responded. I mean, we know parents, but we don't know which parents or which students. So, I mean, but what I've also seen is that you're right. I mean, I think there's a group of very active parents and students and staff that will engage in that, but there's definitely a group that often gets marginalized in the process and they just don't respond for whatever reason it is, whether it's access or it's a lack of ability to really engage with the questions. So I know one of the things that I talked to Dr. Cooper about before that, I think there's all that intentionality in between all of this of how there's particular outreach to other groups too, so that we can make sure that we've got capacity to sort of go in with those groups and make sure that we give them an opportunity to either we can listen and we can hear to what their input is. But we're definitely going to have families on the fringes that are not going to respond to the survey, and their voice is important. But how we get to that voice, I think, is probably more important.
So is it possible to have them identify themselves?
They probably won't do it. I mean, I think
But they may not even do it at all. So
Yeah.
even if they identify themselves, they won't even do the survey. It's like, how do you get them to do the survey?
We can, so on the proposed, we ask for their highest level demo, right? So are they a parent? Are they a teacher? Are they a community member? We ask for that. We can add, if you wanted to ask, drill down questions, more specifically in terms of neighborhood or constituency, district, director districts, whatever it might be. I just would caution you that
it gets too good.
the stakeholder feedback is not selecting your superintendent, right? I want to be clear. It serves several purposes, as I outlined. But ultimately, it is not meant to be an objective process, right? That lines up the criteria by which you use a checklist to select your superintendent. It just is not. So it's critical. It's important for folks to have this opportunity. We use this at a number of stops along the way, but it is just one data point really in your whole decision-making process. So
Can we, go ahead.
Well, I guess it does seem that we should be able to add more demographic questions, even if they're optional. So at a minimum, I think race and ethnicity is important, and that would show us if 95% of our respondents are white, then we got to go back and do some more work.
Yep.
So I would encourage that. The other thing is just on the tell us who you are question. I had a question around why you selected the 7 options that are here. Because parent, educator, student all makes sense to me, as does community member. But superintendent's cabinet seems incredibly narrow.
This was the criteria that was identified by the district that the sample came from, and they wanted that on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then, well,
So that's why I said this is just a sample that came from an Arizona district. We can plug and play anything you want into this. I just wanted to give you an idea of what was currently out there in a semi-peer district.
gotcha. Well, I would cut superintendent's cabinet. Because, well,
I would too.
and then the other thing I was going to say, is just in terms of distribution, I'm assuming it is our intent to go as broad and wide as possible. So we will push it out through parent view, through the core, through every single opportunity we have through social media. Our board members will send out to all of our neighborhood associations and everything. So I think we do that, but I think it would be very helpful, as I mentioned, to have a sense of how we're performing against key metrics so that if need be, we can do additional outreach. So I don't know if you could work that in here.
So just to
somehow.
add, just like the characteristics of the individual, just so that we
No, I'm
know.
saying like let's say it's open 10 days and at 7 days out, we have a pulse check and we have like,
Okay.
as I said, 95% of our respondents are superintendent's cabinet. Like that would tell us there's something wrong and we need to really double down on pushing it out to a greater population.
Or it's all administrators
Yeah,
or something. I think that's important. I wouldn't have administrators on there or superintendent's cabinet. And for support staff, I would put school staff. Because you have teacher, but then support staff. Does everybody else in the school consider themselves support staff? I would just say school staff, where you are staff at school.
Do you have typical language that you use when you collect through HR, when they how do employees
On our surveys, yeah.
themselves,
On
but,
ours.
that sort of thing. That's where I would defer. What are people most used to seeing?
I'm not sure how we identify. That's the hardest piece, is to sometimes identify who the audience is. The only sure way I know, and it's not guaranteed, is social media. So when we build this out, we will, of course, use every available mechanism there is to get the word out. I will say that this board has a unique advantage in the years that I've been here, in that in the work you've already done, that we've already done with Emerging Stronger, there are already built-in audiences who we can work with. When you talked earlier about advertising, we'll take that list of everyone who was in, not necessarily all the invites, but certainly the groups who received our pamphlets, and we'll request with them and meet with them that they put the advertisements on their websites and that they join the social media campaigns, so that all of this information has a broader reach than just going to specific email addresses for the district
sure,
versus
yeah,
employees.
But I guess, Monica, the question too, do we have a standard list of like, tell us who you are kind of thing?
Like you're a parent, you're a teacher, your staff, your,
When we're doing a
For
survey.
For example, right?
We
some-
don't.
Some districts use the terminology classified staff and certified staff. Other districts think, oh my gosh, that just,
Mhm.
that so undervalues what, so.
So maybe
is
as we're
there
going.
commonality
Sure.
through HR of how employee groups are identified? That's what we would be seeking.
So maybe what we could do is we go back to work on the questions and we look at this one, tell us who you are. Come up, sort of look at some of our previous surveys in terms of who we have them mark, who they are, and what are some of the standard ways that we've done that, so that maybe we have some consistency there.
Yes, we can work
We
with
could,
Chris West on that.
okay.
This and his team that.
Yeah, because they do all the surveys, so we probably already have some standard ways of
Yeah.
doing that, and let's do that, and then that can come back with the questions as well as that piece, and then I think I think board members, what we'll be doing is, because we did talk about this, protocol is like Dr. Cooper will be communicating with Johanna and I will just get stuff out as quickly as we can, and maybe pushing you a little bit hard to say, please review this now, so that
And I do
we can
think-
get
I
moving.
do think it would be a good idea to do a couple of progress checks along the way.
Okay,
And we can work with K-12 to.
we did that.
that out.
We did that during our goals and guardrail piece as well, because we looked at, survey response, and we could see where we didn't have response and did a secondary push, and we were able to, to kind of move our demographics a little bit. Okay.
and I mean, I would just worry that there are certain, like, we have basically 4 quadrants in our city, that there would be certain quadrants that we wouldn't see a response from. And even though we may know what their demographics are, they're Hispanic or Asian or Native American, we wouldn't really know what part of the city they lived either. And how do we do that? Are we going to get everybody from the Northeast Heights or the Northwest that are going to respond? And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
If we don't have everyone. Just wondering how you can figure that all out.
I honestly don't know how to answer that, because what I would tell you is our stakeholder feedback around what we're trying to gather in response to these questions has never been that sophisticated. We've gotten really good information that's driven really positive searches without ever trying to be that sophisticated in understanding the feedback, right?
So do you ever ask for the demographics of, them putting their race or their gender, you never have? Okay.
We really just, matter of fact, we've typically parsed it out in 3, and that's staff member, parent, community member. So are they answering primarily as an employee? Are they answering as a current parent of the district? Or are they otherwise just a member of the community that's interested? That's largely the extent of the demographics that we've collected. Because we're really not trying to draw, if we were doing a pre-bond election poll, right? Or if we were doing something else that was intended to be much more sophisticated in terms of parsing out all of that information, obviously, right? But we would elevate that to a completely different platform. We'd use polling software and polling firms to do that. It's really not so. I don't want to leaving you with the thought that we can make this into a very sophisticated and scientifically defensible statistical poll. It's not what we're intending to do.
And that's what I was going to get back, because I loved when you said earlier, the responses to this is not what's going to help us to select our candidate per se.
It may.
It's going to help inform some of the pieces because it was that first part. It's going to help the Board of Education to identify if we are on the same page or in the same, if we have some synergy around what the thoughts are out there. And I think we already to some degree know some of that because we've been doing a lot of surveys this year. So I think part of what we could do for the board is to remind everybody of like some previous surveys or information that we had too, that could also become part of that place to sort of build our general awareness in terms of where we think our community is. But there's a lot of, I know that there's a lot of survey fatigue out there too from the district, because every time, I mean, not a lot of times when I'm with constituents, there's like, God, another survey, you know, so they feel like they've also been surveyed a lot. And so I think we just need to be really cognizant of that and also utilize some of the information we've already been gathering for the last 2 years too, because I think it's real relevant.
So
If it's
So-
helpful, we can put together quickly a communications plan to submit to you, Mr. Cooper,
let's just,
and the board. It'll give you an idea, not so much of how specific we can be in getting the demographics, but surely to give you some comfort that we will be successful in reaching the entire city so that you can know how that's being done. And if there are techniques you don't want to use, or if there are more you'd like to add, we can get that done if it's helpful.
No, I think that would be great.
sure, that'd be great, Monica.
I think that would be fantastic. I just wanted to push back on the 3 categories of parent, educator, community, because from my perspective, that's just frankly not enough. Like, that's non-negotiable for me, unacceptable, in part because we have just committed ourselves to truly engaging our community. And I think as one of our guardrails that we just passed, like, we will not make major decisions without engaging our community. And to Member Peterson's point, if we're engaging the same people over and over, which are the wealthier, whiter, more educated, that's not fully engaging our community. So for me, it's important that we're collecting the information about who's responding, period, so that we can, to the point Monica made, just make sure that we're doing it
That's
correctly.
fair, yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I think I agree with that as well. I mean, I think the goal was to look at this and add, working with with Chris West about surveys, if there's any other data collection pieces that are customary in terms of what we've done that will help us.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be it doesn't need to be real exhaustive, but I think it would be really helpful because I don't want to get to fatigue either that they don't fill it out, right? Because that's the other thing too. So I like that it's short and sweet. Let's be short, sweet, to the point. And then I think we're more likely to get response too.
So when they check to tell us who you are, they can put in more than one. So they could be a parent and an educator, or do they have to
You can
choose one?
Set that either way.
Okay, because I think sometimes they are parent and educators. And I mean, I know nobody wants to add anymore, but like to me, and tell us who you are. And this maybe just be important to me is like, I think knowing that somebody is a tribal leader, I think that's just important for us to know, just in my opinion. So.
And to that point, the feedback from folks who are that specific, would you expect that feedback to come from this survey, or would you expect that feedback to come from some direct outreach and some intentional?
We would hope that it would more come that way. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, we would want that for sure.
Okay.
We're just doing really well with, you know, our tribal leaders, and
Yeah.
I just think we need to make sure that we continue that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, the next
Thank
item,
you, Monica.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying.
That's okay. The next item on the agenda, we have 2 items left. The next one is the review compensation for posting. So this is something that varies significantly district for district, state by state. And so we always have it on the agenda because number one, it may very well be the prime driver that separates your candidates either from other candidates or among themselves. And I say that because this is Currently, this is significantly a candidate's market. Pools all across the country, there's still really, really strong pools and strong individuals out there who want to do this work, but they are shrinking. The pools are shrinking everywhere. And so it's a supply and demand issue. Also, depending on where we do searches, I'll give you an example. In Colorado, there is a statute on the books in Colorado that requires the Board of Education, any entity, to publish the salary range as part of the posting. So in Colorado, long gone are the days where we would publish a salary commensurate with experience in education, subject to negotiation, right? Something like that. I've spoken with your legal counsel around any statutory or internal requirements that would require something different from how much flexibility you have around this. And the answer to that was really, you have a lot of flexibility. You're not bound by current statute around that. So this is not, as I said in the annotation, this is not something that we necessarily have to settle on today. But at some point before we get right toward the end, we need to know, we meaning your search agents, in conversations with candidates, because what you don't want to do is really settle on a top-notch candidate. You're all in alignment with who you want, and then that falls apart at the end in terms of negotiation because you can't come anywhere near agreement around salary. So I provided you the most recent salary study from AASA in the packet. You also have very similar, I would assume, very similar information available to you from Great City because of your membership there. So there really are two things. At some point, we need to know where the guardrails are around compensation as we talk to candidates, because if you and a candidate in our conversations are $60,000 or $70,000 apart in terms of, there's no sense in bringing that candidate forward, likely, right, at the end of the day. But you also necessarily don't want to put yourselves in the position of posting a salary range that either boxes you in too low, right? Or you mortgage the farm right off the bat that didn't have to happen. So that's why we provide as much objective data as we can around the salary, but I will tell you, no one ever criticized a Board of Education for paying their superintendent too little. And so this is always, this is always a part of the search that is a bone of contention, both internally and externally. So do you have the council data available to,
We don't have the Council of Great Cities school data in front of
Okay,
us. I
okay.
think I know the only thing that I mean, I've looked at that one before, but I didn't look at it as a comparison with the AAS one that you gave us.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has any other.
They
They're really
They're very-
close.
they're-
I was
they
gonna
would
say they're
very-
close.
That'd be very close.
Mhm.
Although I would say that the Great City Schools is probably a little more applicable than AASA because they're dealing, their membership focus are larger school districts. AASA is obviously member districts all across the country, many of which are very small, right? So I think the N of districts the size of Albuquerque in this study is close to single digits, I think, if I remember correctly. So it's just not as it's not as transferable as maybe Great City. But before we actually get to the data itself or spend any time on the data, what are your thoughts about including a salary range as part of the posting? Or is that a more dynamic and later piece of conversation, and on the posting be, the typical subject to negotiation kind of language?
I'll just go down the line in terms of what you all think. I'll start with Barbara Peterson.
It's tricky because I guess I don't have a lot to add to that. All of those variables of how many people will we attract and what can we actually afford and all of those things. I can't add anything to this conversation. Hey, can I ask a separate question now, or should I wait to the end?
Go ahead and ask it.
Okay, I'm just curious in your experience, Doctor. You know, we have these sunshine laws, which I think have certain, I mean, I think there are lots of reasons to have them. I think that it serves a role for the community, but I also hear a lot of comments from various people about how it really limits our pool, that experienced superintendents who do not want to jeopardize their current position will not apply. And I'm just curious about how you see that, how many obstacles does that put in our way of finding the pool?
That's a great question, and I will just tell you completely unfiltered and directly, that will be your largest challenge in this search.
Mhm.
In speaking with Art earlier last week, because that was one of my initial questions, because that varies state to state statutorily, and then it even varies district by district within states based on adopted policy or protocols. The statutory disclosure requirements in New Mexico will significantly limit your candidate pool. There's no doubt in my mind that will happen. So we have to be upfront with candidates about that. As a matter of fact, in my experience, and I'm certainly not an attorney and I have not worked all across this country, but I would have a hard time believing that there is any state outside of New Mexico that has disclosure requirements to the extent that, at least in terms of candidate information, it's New Mexico. And candidates will be very well aware of that, and it will be I mean, you know, we're responsible for disclosing that to candidates. And so that concern about sitting experienced leaders, whether they be superintendent or otherwise, jeopardizing their, you know, they may really have a really strong urge to come and lead Albuquerque Public Schools. They just can't take the risk of, if they're not the selected candidate, what that would happen. And so even in states that have many more protections in terms of confidentiality in place, we oftentimes lose candidates, you know, as the progress goes further and that disclosure becomes more critical or required. So I hate to sound like it's a doomsday scenario. It certainly is not, but it's a very good question, and it will be the greatest challenge I feel that you have to overcome in this search.
Sobering, but thank you.
I just did a quick review on the Council of Great City Schools, and it looks like the average salary for 50 to 100,000 students, the average salary was 260,000. So that's just that was just at the very top of that. I guess, and I'll open it. I just wanted to pull that up because so anybody else want to contribute? Have a question at this point?
I guess my perspective is sort of a both and. I mean, I think leaning more towards the salary commensurate based on experience within a range based on this, because anyone who is applying who's a serious candidate is going to know what the range is anyway.
They're going to know what the nationwide data, the data is.
I mean, my concern always is when I go out and I'm talking to constituents or talking to community, and when we talk about what, New Mexico and what our average salary is or median salary is here in New Mexico, and I'm sure you know what that is. And then you talk about a superintendent who, yes, obviously went to college and has a master's degree. And when they hear what the salary is, people are still in New Mexico, still really dumbfounded at that. They are just shocked that somebody's getting a salary plus extra benefits that basically amount to $300,000. And I've never had a single person that asked that question, and I told him the answer, that wasn't shocked. So it's New Mexico. And do I think that a great superintendent deserves a great salary? I think that about a great teacher and great doctor and great anything. But it's just always concerning out there, and nobody has ever been, oh, yep, that's exactly what they should get paid. So
And there certainly is some give and take around cost of living, right? So if you're, you're trying to, you have a
you're living in New York or
that's coming from, from Pennsylvania, right? Or so, but at the end of the day, you're not competing against New Mexico salaries for talent. You're competing across the country for this talent. And I don't discount that at all. And it does put boards in a very uncomfortable position many times, regardless of whether you're in New York or New Mexico or Colorado or Florida. As I said, no one ever criticized a Board of Education for paying their superintendent too little.
it's always just it's always very uncomfortable for me. So
Understand.
So my feeling is, that I think we need to publish it. But it's a question of what's the top end?
That's a very good point, because every candidate that you interview is going to be expected to be paid at the top end, right? So you don't want to publish a top end salary that is so high based on a design to think, to catch people's eye, with the idea that you're not really going to pay that, but that gets folks in the door, right? And then you can negotiate something else. So whatever that range is, you need to be prepared to pay the top of that range if your candidate in your mind qualifies for the top of that range.
And we're already facing the difficulties of the Sunshine Law, right?
Yes.
Transfer. So, yeah, I mean, it's.
I know when I apply for a job, and thank God I'm not doing that anymore. But when I've applied for jobs, I always did look at a salary range. I expected that because it was helpful to know, because I wouldn't have bothered to apply if it wasn't within my range. So I think I agree with Board Member Gonzalez. I think within that range, but also commensurate with their experience, so that we're sort of letting that, out the bag. It doesn't mean you're automatically guaranteed that, but we're looking for experience. But I agree, what's the top end? I mean, I think that's the hardest part for us, is knowing where's our low end and where's our top end.
There will be raises.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we,
So the data table that I provided for you from 22-23 AASA lists the median for 50 to 100,000 students. The median is $300,900, and the base is 250. The lowest is 253. So now, understanding the N count, the N there is only 8 respondents. And so that's why I said the council is probably a more accurate snapshot and representation, but.
And I think the data I looked at was really quick, because it was dated. It's probably old. So I don't have the current table.
Yeah, it says just asphalt.
You just asked for it. Yeah. Cause I was looking at an old table. So it probably has gone up since then.
But I think it's interesting that 100,000 or more makes so much less. So I would want to benchmark off of those, really the 3 bottom here, 25,000 to above 100,000.
Yes.
And for me, honestly, like just looking at that, I would say a range is like 220 to 3. And in part because one of our neighbor districts just hired their superintendent paying 200,000 in Las Cruces. And I think if we think of the most comparable districts to us would be like Denver, for example, in terms of size and demographics, and that's 305.
Mhm.
So I think just like trying to stay in that range. And I know that's a big range, but it gives us the opportunity, I think, for that negotiation. And like our unicorn candidate, which I don't think exists, would be that
No,
very
right,
top range.
Right.
So I know if you say commensurate with experience, which we said, do you ever say commensurate with like a proven
So
track record?
I prefer just to say subject to negotiation,
Okay,
right? Because
Okay. because if somebody's done like a fantastic job improving student outcomes, which we're really about,
absolutely. But
I
what if
mean,
they
it's
don't have a
like-
doctorate, for example, right?
it doesn't matter if they've done a
Exactly.
great job, so.
If they come in with demonstrated results.
Yep.
And they're a non-traditional superintendent who maybe has only been in the realm of education for half a dozen years, right? Education and experience, their rubric isn't going to be scored overly high, but they may be your unicorn candidate. So I just think subject to negotiation is the best language to put in there.
Okay,
I think the other point is since we've moved to student outcomes focused governance and are changing our superintendent evaluation process, we are ultimately going to incorporate bonuses based on outcome. That's the whole SOFG model. So I think keeping that in mind as well.
Is that a potential or is that a definite that will happen?
It's a potential because it's one of the subsequent
Got it,
parts of
okay.
SOFG, but if committed to SOFG, we would do that.
Yeah, okay. So we probably don't want to include that as a caveat in
No.
posting yet.
Oh, no, I'm just
No, no, no.
saying,
I'm
like,
just,
keep that in
I'm
mind.
thinking
that-
about semantics for the posting.
Yeah.
I would say subject to negotiation and then, I
Mhm.
mean, that is a very
Broad.
220, did you say 220 to 300?
That yes, I said to 320, but I don't know how much our current chiefs make. So we have the superintendent, I know how much the superintendent
Right.
makes. I don't know how much the chief academic officer, chief operations officer, chief schools.
Yeah.
But the superintendent should make more than them.
Yeah.
So whatever that's the bottom.
Okay.
whatever the highest paid, obviously the superintendent should make more than the highest paid cabinet member.
And we would probably want to project that for what salaries look like for next year for 20.
Yes,
For 24, 25.
absolutely.
So I will, I'll circle back around and Johanna and I will do a little work
Mhm.
on that data but I know, I think I hear the direction that we're headed.
So let's make sure.
What I'm hearing
Let's
is
make
we're
sure.
We're
Yeah.
gonna Post a range.
Yes,
We're going to say that range is
subject to negotiation. I like the top at 350. I'm not concerned with that. I think that's fine.
350.
We didn't say 350. I thought it was.
Did you say 350? 320, 320, 325 is fine, whatever in there, that's fine, but over 300. And then I agree with you on that bottom being, it should be what, I don't know, a percentage increase above whatever our highest paid chief is making.
That's not difficult to, and
Okay.
actually this AASA study provides some comparative data around that
Okay.
indexing that might help us just a little bit. Put a little bit of quantifiable thought. to
Okay.
it, But we can figure that out.
So are people gonna look though at, our candidates gonna look at what the superintendent is making, what we chose to pay him now?
Potentially,
Mhm.
but everybody thinks they're worth more than the last person. That's just the way the mindset.
Sure.
So, I wouldn't, and remember, these folks are not going to be applying for this job in a vacuum, right? I'm going to be talking with them.
Yeah.
Everything,
That
so
was, yeah.
once they get in the pipeline, then we're having these same types of conversations with candidates. So I wouldn't put too much thought into that as a benchmark.
So are you
Good
good with
question,
the, you good with the range? Board Member Dominguez?
Mhm.
How about Board Member Peterson? You good with that range? Okay, so I think
Okay.
we've got that.
And Johanna and I will work later this week on that. Okay, so hopefully you all have done your homework because we're going to work through this exercise. This goes fairly quickly.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the chart here. And Piers, can you hear me okay? Remotely? And
Board Member Peterson, can you still hear him remotely?
okay.
I think so.
Because if not, we can move the chart closer to.
Well, I'm wondering if the chat would be easier. Let's figure it out when we get to
Okay,
Peterson's.
Okay.
So what I want to do here is we're going to work through this abbreviated version of a nominal group technique. But what I'm trying to do here is identify from the board's perspective those really the answer to that second question that we posed in the survey to the staff. What are the skills, qualities, attributes, experiences that you all deem are most important to your next superintendent? The outcome of this, if we think about backward design here, what we're working toward is what I'm going to use to craft sort of the outline narrative that becomes the job. It's not a job description, right? So don't put an HR lens on this or an EEOC lens on this, right? In terms of a job description, we're talking about a short narrative that captures what the characteristics or backgrounds are as folks look at this and they read this and say, oh, this matches, this fits with my profile really well, or that I don't really fit with this at all, right? This is the very first announcement on our website that goes then to our advertising partners that says, if you have all of these and more to be our unicorn candidate, please apply for APS. So with that, let's just go in a clockwise fashion. Hopefully you have your list of your homework, and I'm going to ask you for the first thing on your list. It doesn't have to be in order if your list isn't in order, just the first thing on your list. And we don't want to have any redundancies on the chart. So if somebody steals your thunder, cross it out and go on to the next one. Okay, because we're going to do a little bit of ranking here later. So Ms. Gonzalez, let's just start with you, if we would, and we'll just go clockwise. What's the first thing on your list?
Goal oriented.
Goal oriented. Okay,
Put kids first.
kids first.
I'm going to be responding for Board Member Jackson because I've got
Okay.
her list.
Good.
Because it's already got students, patient, dogged determination. Mine is harder because I'm wordy, but deep understanding of structures and practices related to equity and anti-racism.
Respectful of workforce.
Ms.
And then I
Peterson.
guess we go to Board Member Peterson,
Collaborative.
collaborative.
Okay, we'll go back to you again, Ms. Pearson. We'll go back in reverse order this time. What's the next one?
Let's see. I had it on the tip of my tongue. I wasn't expecting to be right back. Let's see.
Come back to you if you'd like.
So and this is wordy, but I think aware of the strengths of the community. Respectful of and aware of the strengths of the community.
Okay.
Supportive and tempered.
I can listen while I'm.
Okay, so I'm for myself, I would say strong negotiation and mediation capacity. And then for board member Jackson, her next one is committed to our goals and strategic plan.
You said negotiation.
Negotiation and mediation skills.
Mediation.
Mhm.
Every child, ready? Every child can learn. Every capital letters.
Data driven.
Data driven. I'm going to stop you there very quickly and just ask a quick question. In your mind, do data driven and data informed mean different things? Do they characterize different things?
They do, but you can't
Okay.
have one without the other.
Second one,
Impatient.
impatient, not impatient, impatient. And so I'm drawing a connection between these two toward outcomes, right? Like timely, speedy, data. Okay, thank you.
And I would just want to know if this might go with something that's already up there, proven track record or exceptional, proven track record at improving student outcomes.
Yeah.
So for board member Jackson, the next one would be confident in decision making. See, mine would be it's kind of like similar, it's just a very intentional on diversity.
I'm still listening.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm torn between team builder and grassroots community organizer.
Say that again.
I'm torn between team builder and grassroots. I think I'm stick with that one. Grassroots community organizer.
Okay.
Are we back to me?
Yes, we are.
Um,
Two that-
knowledgeable educator.
And a second one, since we're going to come right back to you to go in the other direction.
Thoughtful.
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 Not rash.
Oh,
You want to put the one you were torn with now? sir?
nope. Advocate for Martinez Yazzie population. Passionate advocate for Martinez Yazzie and African Americans.
A board member Jackson's winner. She's-
Winner?
Winner. Let's see, mine.
Thinking about the online survey and what we were gonna.
I
ask.
know, I
We
was
don't
like, what's a
want somebody
win?
that
We don't want, we don't want a
lose.
loser. Yeah. We don't want a loser. We want a winner. I want to say politically savvy.
Very good. That was on my list.
And I'd say strong communicator / fluent in Spanish or bilingual, however.
Multilingual, yeah.
I mean, I would say for sure we have to have that.
Yeah.
Um,
So you strong communicator,
Yeah, I'm
fluent in Spanish or bilingual, however you think is best to.
I likely will break those out,
Mm-hmm,
separate criteria.
mm-hmm.
Risk taker / courageous.
Right back at you.
And what's your next one?
Visionary.
And respectful of New Mexican culture.
Got it.
So Board Member Jackson's inspires respect by being impressively capable. Doesn't need to be like so much as respected. So it's kind of like you can condense that, whatever you want. Inspires respect by being impressively capable, but doesn't need to be liked so much as respected. And then mine would be approachable.
Team builder.
Team builder.
Walks on water.
Yep.
Heart the Red
sure.
Sea.
We're getting there.
Preferably single, no life except this.
Board Member Peterson, you're up. Unless you think we've got it all.
I think I've put in everything. Maybe I think it's already there. More explicitly understands the value of negotiated agreements and works collaboratively with staff. I think it's already there.
So I heard we have negotiation and
Mediation.
mediation. What I heard a little more specifically from you was that specifically in terms of like employee agreements,
Yep.
or master contracts.
Right, and understands the value of that
Thanks.
and has a problem-solving approach, problem-solving and collaborative approach to working with employees.
I'm going to categorize that as master agreement.
Mhm.
But I get the segue.
Did I put advocate already?
Mhm.
And I did say for the most, I wrote it again. Let's see. Preferably, I mean, we're pie in the sky, right? Lived experience of our kids.
That's good.
Yeah. Particularly Title I, since we're 80%.
So Board Member Jackson's ego. Someone who wants to be the one to turn things around. So I know. It's like, we'll just put ego. I don't, for me, I think I'm done.
And I think this might go in one that was already there, hold educators in high regard. I think it would be the same thing.
Mhm.
I'm putting values educators
Mhm.
that capture it. Okay.
Reformer or change oriented.
Picking my Oxford dictionary.
Trying to get it to one or two words is like, I just don't do
I
it.
get it. Capture it. Okay. Did you have a second one?
Well, we've gone through our 5, but I had more, so I'm happy to give more.
Oh,
The
okay.
rules that you gave,
Yeah.
we've
A
done.
rule follower. I appreciate that. Any last thoughts? Okay, here's what I'm going to do very quickly. I'm going to stick these up so that you can see them, maybe. If I drape them over the chairs, can you see them well enough or no?
Oh, we could.
Okay. Back behind you, maybe? Okay. Oh, they're already sticky, so that's. If you could give those to her. While you're doing that, I'm going to hand you some sticky notes.
You?
No, we're just, these are for your, right.
I think
So-
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one more.
Want to make sure that this is. I'm just going to very quickly number these in order. I'm going to ask you. This may be a little difficult for Board Member Peterson, but we'll.
Yeah. Board Member Peterson is definitely at a disadvantage here.
We can type them up and,
Yeah. Type them up to her. They're gonna type them up.
They're gonna type them up and give them, okay.
Board Member Peterson, we're gonna type them up and send them over to you so that you'll get them.
So what I would like you to do. So I've numbered them 1 through 34.
Okay.
Understanding that some of these are a little, are very similar or maybe even redundant, that's okay. I would like for you to identify your top 5. So take 5 different sticky notes and write down the number corresponding to the thought of the top 5. If they are the 5 that you put up there and no one else's, that's okay. But maybe somebody else thought of something that you didn't. But write your top, let's do this, write your top 6. 6 sticky notes, write your top 6. In no specific order, just write down your top 6. I'm going to ask you to rank them in just a second.
You want them on different,
6 separate sticky notes with just a number in the middle. 13, 27, 4, whatever it might be.
Oh.
Well, that, once you have your 6 identified, please rank them 1 through 6 and just write in the, like the top right-hand corner, maybe put a circle around so I know which one is the ranking and which one's the identifiable. Just put number 13, put a 1 if that's your top one, put a 2 on the next one. So rank them 1 through 6.
Oh, I have to go back up.
Was this the one about,
Strategic plan, yes. Yes, I'm sorry, if my handwriting or my abbreviation is in the way. And then if you can multitask, I'm going to give you one final direction. If on that list of 34 items, if there is anything on that list, this is to Ms. Gonzalez's point about the survey question. If there is anything on any of these charts that is absolutely a non-starter for you. So you are, maybe you didn't rank it right. It might not just that it doesn't make your cut or list, but if there is anything up there that is the antithesis of what you want to see in your next superintendent, please write that number down. And then put a star on that sticky note so that I know that that's a no vote, if you will, as opposed to a ranking.
So it's something that you don't feel is important.
No. Not that you don't feel is important. If it's, if you think that it for example, let's say that you absolutely think that an individual with a strong ego is a non-starter for you, right? Then that would be one that you would write down there. Or if you want somebody who is totally intuitive and not data driven, for example, right? That would be the antithesis of that. So.
and we put that on a separate.
Put that on a separate sticky note and just identify that as, for me, this would disqualify, not that it's just not as important as others, but that would disqualify a candidate in your mind. I will tell you that doesn't happen very often, but
So we just put the number on a separate sticky.
yeah, and then put a
just
star,
write
put a star on that,
Okay.
on that sticky note, just so that I don't confuse it with what you did as rankings.
Okay,
If there's more than one, put it on there too.
So as I look back over the list, I have to say on my top 5, and I think this is implied by some of the others, but I don't think it was explicitly stated. I added a completely different number 5 for my top attributes, and that's an effective administrator. It's implied in any number of the other ones, but I thought that was a more succinct way of putting it.
Okay. So if anyone has a non-starter, a sticky note with a non-starter, please let me have that. I'm not going to share these at this point.
There you go.
Non-starter. Could you, Johanna, could you share my email address with Board Member Peterson? And so she could, either that or my cell phone number, and she could text me if she has any non-starters. Okay, and then so what we will do now is just a very quick round robin. Everybody tell me, we'll start here. Okay, tell me your number 1 number. Just tell it by the number. So whatever you have number 1 on your sticky, what number is it?
14.
14.
The
Number-
list that I got does not have numbers. And so if you wouldn't mind saying what it is, I'd appreciate it.
That was proven student outcome. Number one.
On number 18.
Number 18, goal oriented, kids first. That's number 1,
34.
34,
21.
21,
Oh, I'm sorry. That was reformer change. We didn't do what we said we
Oh,
were going to do.
sorry.
I have no idea what the numbers are.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
So can we start over? And
So Peggy's was kids first. Mine was reformer change agent. Yours was
21,
Next workforce.
respects workforce.
okay. And your number 1, Barbara.
you don't have to tell me, but just tell me what it is and I'll find the number.
Knowledgeable educator.
Eligible educator,
Number 26.
26. Got it, thank you. Okay. Ms. Pierce, number 2 for you. We'll go back in reverse order again. Number 2.
I'll go with deep understanding of structures related to equity and anti-racism.
Number 20.
Number 20.
Thank you. Number 2,
Number 20.
number 2,
Number 20.
number 2.
Number 11.
Which is
Now you can learn
And mine was 34, reformer change.
reformer change agent. Number 3 for you.
17,
17
goal
is
oriented.
goal oriented. Number 3,
14.
proven student outcomes.
Number 3 for me is respects New Mexico culture. Number 1.
28.
28. Number 3 is advocate for
Martinez, Yazzie, and African
Yazzie.
Americans.
Okay,
Barbara, your number 3.
I can go with respectful of New Mexico culture.
and then what would be next for you?
Number 4.
My next one would be collaborative.
Oh, it's there, I wrote it.
I know it's
Oh, 27.
22.
Yes. 4. Number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 number is team builder.
Builder.
My number 4 is number 21, respects workforce.
Sex workforce.
Number 31. I think.
31 communicator and bilingual.
13,
13 impatient. Number 5.
12,
Data driven.
Number 1.
Respects New Mexico culture.
My number 5 is bilingual communicator.
Bilingual communicator. Number 5.
10.
10
Committed to
committed to
goals.
goals and strategic plan. Fierce.
Barbara, she's looking through her list.
I can't find what I had. Can you come back to me?
We'll come back to you for 2, for your 5 and 6 in just a minute, okay?
Okay,
So what's your 6th?
33.
33 visionary.
My number 6 is number 22, collaborator.
Okay,
I mean, I would say because values educators and then respects workforce is basically the same, so I put
Yeah.
it on 21.
okay, and I will, yeah. Yep, got it.
20, equity, anti-racism.
We got all your 6?
All mine.
Ms. Pearson, 2 from you, please, 5 and 6.
okay, I think it was my new one that hopefully summarizes some of the others. Effective administrator. And
That,
last
with
one,
proven results? Is that, or are we different?
I think it's somewhat different.
Okay, I'm gonna add it then. Effective administrator?
Yep. And then I think the last one that I haven't put is respectful of workforce.
Respectful of workforce. Okay. Got it. Okay, so as you can see, there are several that have multiple. Now, I'm not going to necessarily throw out any of these as we craft the posting and the narrative, but where we have multiple responses in terms of equity and anti-racism, respects the workforce, respects New Mexico culture, those I'll make sure that I highlight or bubble to the surface. Also, those that have the lowest combined ranking, I'll make sure that I highlight those as well. But this is really this is good stuff. This will allow us to form a really good first introduction to what you're looking for in terms of candidates. So thank you for that. Does anybody want to take a picture of that or capture it before I pull them down? Because I'm taking these with me.
Well, you typed them up, but
Were you going to get it? Okay.
but you don't have the numbers, right?
You'll have the. He's taking.
I'm taking the sheets.
Oh, he's
You want me
taking
to-
the sheet.
Do you want
We
me to,
need a picture.
you want me to take a picture and I'll send them to you? Or you just want to grab them? Okay. I want to be respectful of our time.
I know.
We are at our time.
Yeah,
so.
We have a
because
meeting.
We have a board meeting at 5, so
But I am finished.
we are done with that.
Unless
Okay.
you have any last questions for me, I
Um,
will go back to Colorado Springs and start working.
So, and I just want to remind the board, there's, process. This was step 1. He's going to go back. He's got to do some work. There's going to be communication that's going to be coming all along through this process. Johanna and I will be the point of contact. So just kind of stay tuned for that. I will have a chance. We stuck this right before a board meeting so we could get this piece done. But I will contact Dr. Cooper after this. We'll be in contact and I'll give you guys kind of our next steps. But I think we have a good timeline that he went over with us. And we're going to be working with this as closely as possible. So it seems like we met all the objectives that we had for today. So we're off to a good start. Phase 1 is underway.
Last thing I would just say is, as we go forward and start working on this, there are no major decision-making points that we will do in a vacuum.
Right.
So this just helps us start to get this thing out the door and in front of people.
Okay.
And worst comes to worst, I will be back here with you on November 13th. I'll be back in Albuquerque for that.
When we do our regional meetings. All
Thank you
right.
for
Is
your
there going
good.
to be an opportunity for Crystal to engage or no, to vote on these or?
And also for board member Jackson, because they didn't get a chance to vote on them because we've had 2 board members. I wasn't going to vote for her because I don't know what she would value. So we have 2 board members that perhaps we could send that list to, and we'll have them identified, go through the same process that you went through.
To get
Okay,
organized.
perfect.
to them.
Okay,
Yes.
that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right. So
Very good
then
work.
I know, a lot of work. We did so much work. So the next Board of Education meeting will be October 18th, 2023 at 5 p.m., which is just in 25 minutes. And the special Board of Education meeting will be held on October 25th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. or immediately following the Finance Committee meeting. And the meetings will be held here in the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex. With that,